The question should not be that if I'm audible, the question should be if I'm visible. It's okay. It's just me singing a prayer song. So why were there so many people holding a piece of paper as if they escaped prison and they were wanted? Well, they are wanted by me, the people's poet, the pajama poet you can trust to forget your secrets, but manage to capture them in a poem within 5 minutes. A perception of you from the eyes of a person who values your voice will pay absolute attention and create radical acceptance for you. Now, how will I do that and why will I do that? Especially when I can't hear you. I am deaf from one ear, but just one ear. I can hear from the same ear that Van Gogh cut off because the colors were too loud. I know what it feels like when nobody believes you. I could not see and hear as a child, but people just thought I was not paying attention. Now the same kind of people ask me to wear hearing aids because they have to be louder. My neurodivergence, where I take things literally, works in my favor. I turn sensory overload into art. I perceive a lot more than an average prototype person. And details of behavior are often not valued and found to be annoying. If I told you that why are your feet closed off, you would immediately get conscious. And so, but it is valued if I had written a poem and I had given it to you and be like, hey, when you close your feet, I feel like I can't talk to you, right? So I realized that poems are the oldest forms of case studies. They are a diagnosis with metaphors for prescription. If you had first asked me what I was doing on the street when I was writing poems and singing songs, I would have told you I'm trying to prove a hypothesis wrong. I studied psychology, and once people found out, everybody kept asking me, can you read minds? And I thought, can we train someone to read minds if they observe too much? Can we help them structure it in a way that it applies ideas across all layers of society without disrupting, but improving them instead? Reduce the frequencies of all the disruptions and create space for connection? I believe we can, because my grandmother did that to me. But she died during COVID, and I became absolutely alone, and I retreated. Yet, when I went online and I asked people to fund my pursuit of justice, people paid for a poet to go to law school in exchange for poems. And while I was on this pursuit of justice, I realized that you cannot pursue justice without becoming a scapegoat. Because everybody has a justification of why the world is the way it is, and why humans do not deserve basic human rights. It refused to accommodate my labels because while I can see its details, it cannot see mine. Despite me proving to the world again and again, I am more than my disability. I learned how to play 3 musical instruments without being able to hear and without any traditional training. And in that moment, I knew that the world is an infrastructure that is more disabled than me. Whoever said, be the change you want to see in the world, really stuck with me. And that is all I'm trying to be, accessible as a person with empathy to people who need it without putting a price on their feelings. I'm trying to change what I want to see. I'm a researcher, I'm a poet, and a student for life and off life. So I stopped trusting communities after I saw the amount of hate there was for people who belong to my identity and gender as a performer. So I deactivated my account, and I did what pop artists do. I reinvented myself in the image of my worst fear, and I chose to wear comfortable clothes to write about uncomfortable things. So initially, when I started out as an artist, I was encouraged to speak satire, look at the big guy and go like, you are the problem, But later on, when it was no longer a trend, people stopped inviting me because I took off my hijab and I could not be tokenized anymore. So I was excluded, and during this time, I was also invited to Church Street to write poems for strangers by Atisa. He started busking in 2016 before anybody else. He would sell his photographs and poems for pay what you want. He hates getting credit, so I am giving him some, and he did not give me a good enough picture to put in this talk. So writing poems, right, on the street. It renewed my faith in humans, and I decided to work even harder at legal research. But I got better results when people found me as a stranger on the street, bachpan ka dost, telling them what they want to hear, then a lawyer who was telling them what they don't want to hear. And I was able to take my sensory overload and make it beautiful, maybe a little bit like Van Gogh. Hundreds of people, they came out after pandemic and experienced the arts street and found me as their poet. And it completely changed my perspective about life. To be trusted by marshals, artists, and your audience while not getting sick, we also helped reduce air pollution. This effort made me realize that more people deserve to take space. But in this country, a car has more right to take space than artists. And I learned that as an organizer also, but I don't give up hope. I grew up a believer, despite the circumstances that I grew up in. I was held captive for half a decade as a child, but I did not lose hope. I always found the mercy of strangers fulfilling. My grandmother told me stories when I was younger, when we traveled, to help me cope with traveling. She used to personify the infrastructure around us, and we would imagine things like, what would a tree say to a cop when his branches are broken? My grandma was the first one to notice my imagination was filled with inaccessible beauty and the trauma of reaching it. She realized the world was too loud in my head, but if I grew up with a method to experience the world, it was through stories. When you're surrounded by people who do not believe you, it is nice to be trusted by complete strangers. I have been called an NGO, a confession booth, a lighthouse, a message from the universe, but mostly courageous. And sometimes shameless. I think I'm trying to deal with the shame a neurodivergent person deals with when they keep telling the truth again and again. But the world is full of different truths. So I share the page with you to find a common ground between our truths. In my personal life, though, nobody trusts me with their secrets because I forget it is a secret and I say it out loud at random places. But I do not forget a poem. I sit with forgotten things in history and ask people to recall something they forgot. Maybe it is the patience. A quill and a typewriter were perfectly functional, but humanity was never patient. And I try to remind humans we evolve through patience and trust. The promise of civilization is that we will be safe and we will have the space to be patient enough to raise our children. And in a world full of stranger danger, I wish to be the person you ask for directions and get a ready-made map for your emotions. People from all walks of life have come to me. People I could never imagine meeting in real life. These people taught me the dictionary of connection I have personally never experienced in my life. 1,442 people. Imagine having no references for love, but being able to recognize its virtue in you. The world always has allowed me to exist as a prototype of good intentions and greater ideas. When I was young and I could not travel after the trauma of abduction, I gave people adjectives written behind bus tickets, and then I was able to travel in public transport because I was describing and sharing everything what I was seeing. So if you do and I've realized while I was doing that if you do something with good intentions, people with greater intentions find you. I met an architect, a scientist, an activist who works in accessibility while writing poems on the street. We came up with a plan for a local library near my house to convert this space into this. It was a part of the initiative by BBMP to revive public spaces. So this is a bench where women, artists with disabilities, orphans, children, they can take space to create art in collaboration with their audience. And it is also a bench that helps reduce air pollution and it stores rainwater. I am delighted to share that we are one of the selected locations by BBMP to implement this. So I operate on pay what you want. Since I started using this, I have experienced something called barakat. It is basically an abundance in blessing. I know that abundance is subjective. For somebody it's cars, house, but for me it's people's trust. I have found abundance in people's trust. People trust me and they find me to be reliable, which is not something I experience in my personal life. So on weekdays, I do legal research around accessibility, public welfare, and on weekends, and I sit and listen to people and what people love and hope for. I watch the news, I get depressed, I write poems for people, and I realize, oh, no, it's not that bad. It's not that bad yet. So from the time I wrote research papers for students abroad to the time I was an anonymous handle that managed to garner 4 million users, I've come to the conclusion that we are more common than different. Yet, we have not learned how to take space. In a society that values wheels, who claims the right of way? The driver or the walker? And how is it that the person who is granted wheels because of their disability still finds our world unwelcoming? This is where my art lives. In conflict of it all. Beyond formal venues on the cobblestone that should be our shared third places. Have you looked at the cobblestone? They often look like a jigsaw of human connection. So I resist a world that puts a price tag on wonder, on walking, on being surprised, on mercy, on choice, and the beauty you discover only through movement. Instead, I gather what people want to preserve. I craft them into paper poems with my quill and typewriter, and I feel that this archive of feeling is one of the most precious things I own. It makes me feel like a walking, talking greeting card company. I dreamt of becoming a tree, but became a living bench offering hope and support in public space. My name is Mariyam Saigal, and I'm your poet. Thank you.